Unfortunately, no, I'm not a bookworm. I've never been a bookworm. I wish I was a bookworm, but no, I'm not. I have tried to read books in Spanish, in French, in Italian, and I understand that it's very, very useful and everybody should try to read in another language. I absolutely recommend that you read in English if it's something you enjoy. But if it's not something you enjoy, I just don't see the point in forcing it. Hello, everybody. How you doing? And welcome back to another episode of British English Pod. This is your go-to English podcast for you to improve your British English pronunciation, vocabulary, and at the same time, listen to me talking about random things as I teach you different phrasal verbs, expressions, vocabulary, and so on and so forth. And, we've got a specific topic for this week, which is, of course, the topic of the week in my group classes, British English Immersion Club. If you'd like to join my classes, I'll leave a link in the description. But the topic has been related to something that, to be honest, I'm not a big fan of. I've never been into. The topic is reading. So reading books, comics, ebooks, newspapers, magazines, reading in general. And of course, I do know how to read. It would be difficult to be an English teacher if I didn't have the ability to read, but I've never been into it. I've never enjoyed reading. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried, but I've never quite got into it. I've never quite actually enjoyed it and put down a book with the intention and the desire to pick it up again and start reading. It's just the way it is, you know? I tried, but I failed. So that is the topic of the week. I'm going to be walking you through a nice PowerPoint, which I've just created just now. And the PowerPoint includes some expressions, lots of conversation questions, a short dialogue, and plenty more. So we'll discover it as we work through this podcast. But I've got a little short question for you that I'd like you to respond to in the comments. I'd like you to give me your answer. I'm a foodie. I think you're probably well aware of the fact that I'm a foodie. I love food. Food is a passion for me. So I often ask people at the beginning of a class, what did you have for lunch? Or what are you going to have for dinner? Or what did you have for breakfast? So tell me, what was the last meal that you ate? What's the last thing you put in your mouth? In my case, it is right now 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. And, what I had before was something very, very healthy. I had a little bit of toast with olive oil, tomato, and cottage cheese. If you haven't heard of cottage cheese, I'll briefly explain it. It's something that's become quite trendy recently because it's known as being a bit of a superfood. I say superfood, but in reality, the only interesting thing is that compared to other cheeses, it's very healthy. It has very low calories, lots of protein, and it's low in fat. Its name is cottage cheese, like a cottage that you might have in the countryside in the UK or Ireland. So that's what I had, cottage cheese on toast with a little bit of tomato on top, olive oil, salt, and pepper. It's cheap, it's quick, it's healthy, and I think it's quite tasty as well. But it's a bit of an acquired taste, meaning that not everybody likes it, because cottage cheese isn't like the majority of cheeses. It can taste, I don't know, a bit sour, perhaps, and the texture, the consistency, is a bit weird. It's a bit strange, but I'm a fan. I like it. But what about you? What is the last thing you ate? Let me know in the comments. And now let's begin with a few random expressions. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to match 6 common English idioms. They're actually not related to reading or books, but I thought I'd include them anyway. So if you're watching the podcast, you'll see on the left-hand side we have 6 different English idioms, and on the right we have their synonyms or explanations. And the first one is cut to the chase. Cut to the chase. What does it mean if you tell someone, hey, cut to the chase. Come on, cut to the chase. Well, if you tell someone to cut to the chase, you are telling them to get to the point. Maybe they're explaining something or they're telling you a story, but they're not really giving you all of the details. They're not explaining the main idea. So in that case, you could tell them, hey, come on, mate, cut to the chase. Why are you taking so long? So that is the first expression. The second one is be on the ball. And if you are on the ball, well, it is an expression that comes from sport. And you know, if you're doing sport and you have the ball in your hands or at your feet, it means you're ready. You're ready to go. You've got your eye in. So therefore, if you are on the ball, you are focused. You're concentrating. Stay on the ball. Come on, guys. I need you to be on the ball. I didn't sleep a lot last night, so today, I must be honest, I'm not on the ball. I'm not very focused. Now, expression number 3, it is have bigger fish to fry. And this is an interesting one, a strange one. I could say, sorry, I don't think I've got time for that, or I don't think I can help you because I've got bigger fish to fry. Meaning that, well, I have more important things to do. If somebody asks you if you can do them a favor, you can lend them a hand, you can say, sorry, mate, I'd love to, but I'm really, really busy at the moment. I've got bigger fish to fry. It might come across a little bit rude, a little bit impolite, but it's an expression. To have bigger fish to fry. And then the fourth phrase is also related to sport. It is, the ball is in your court. I'm sure you're familiar with this one. Maybe it's my turn, and I finish my turn, and then I go to you and say, all right, John, okay, Lizzie, now the ball is in your court. Meaning, it's your decision, it's your turn, or it's your responsibility. The ball is in your court. Fun fact for anybody who isn't a Spanish speaker. In Spanish, this is translated as the ball is on your roof. Which, I don't know, it doesn't quite make sense to me, but Spanish people would say, la pelota está en tu tejado. Meaning, the ball is on your roof. It's in your court. Anyway, returning to the expressions. The fifth one is come rain or shine. I'm going to go to the beach, come rain or shine. Basically saying, whatever happens, whatever the weather, no matter what. I'm going to do it, come rain or shine. So last, but of course not least, is be on the fence. And of course, a fence is what kind of goes around your garden or private property, and you can jump over the fence if you want to enter this property. But if you're on the fence, you're kind of in between. You're not on one side nor the other side. So, if you're on the fence, you are undecided between two sides, two ideas, two arguments. I use this quite a lot in class. When I ask someone what they prefer, then if they're being a little bit diplomatic and they don't want to pick, I'd say, it seems like you are on the fence. So there we had the expressions, and this next activity is for you to think of which expression you could use to respond to the following situations. So, I'm going to read the first situation for you. It is as follows. Your assistant is asking for help with something unimportant, and you have an important meeting scheduled to start in just a few minutes. I'll repeat. Your assistant is asking for help with something unimportant, and you have an important meeting scheduled to start just in a few minutes. So here, you could respond by saying, I'm really sorry, I can't do that right now because I've got bigger fish to fry. More important things to do. Good. Second scenario. You're being asked your opinion, but you have mixed feelings. I'll repeat. You are being asked your opinion, but you have mixed feelings. Well, it seems like you are on the fence. So you could respond by saying, I don't really know. I'm not sure. I'm on the fence, you see. I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence. Now, third scenario. Your colleagues aren't concentrating, and they're wasting time. Let me repeat. Your colleagues aren't concentrating, and they're wasting time. So you would say, come on, you need to be on the ball. You're not on the ball. You're not focused. God, idiots. Okay, now number 4. You've done a task, and now you're going to give it to a workmate to finish. So you've done your task, and now you're going to hand it over to a workmate to finish it. So you can say, now the ball is in your court. Now the ball is in your court. Or in Spanish, the ball is on your roof. All right, number 5. Your boss is giving a presentation, but she's not being clear, and it's taking forever. Oh, your boss is giving a presentation, but she's not being clear, and it's taking forever. It's taking ages. So you would tell her, please, cut to the chase. Cut to the chase. Get to the point. Please. And now, lastly, number 6. A deadline is approaching. There are many obstacles, but you need to motivate your team to submit the paperwork no matter what. That's the key word. Let me repeat. A deadline is approaching. There are many obstacles, but you need to motivate your team to submit the paperwork no matter what. So I'd say to my team, guys, focus, get your act together. We must submit the paperwork come rain or shine. We've got to submit it come rain or shine. All right. What did you think of those expressions and that little activity? I hope you liked it. I hope you learned some new expressions if you were unfamiliar with them before. And well, if they ring a bell and you've already heard them, I'm sure this was a nice little recap, a nice little review of said expressions. Now let's begin with the topic of reading. And I'm not going to share my screen for this. I'm just going to read the question and answer it. That way, you can just see me. Whether that's what you want or not, I'm not sure. So the first question is, are you a bookworm? Are you a bookworm? Remember, a bookworm is someone who loves books. They love reading. As I said at the beginning, 10 minutes ago now, unfortunately, no, I'm not a bookworm. I've never been a bookworm. I wish I was a bookworm. But no, I'm not. I have tried to read books in Spanish, in French, in Italian, and I understand that it's very, very useful, and everybody should try to read in another language. I absolutely recommend that you read in English if it's something you enjoy. But if it's not something you enjoy, I just don't see the point in forcing it. Like, why bother forcing yourself to do something that you know you're not going to enjoy? Because that way, over a longer period of time, you're going to think like, oh no, I don't want to do that. And you'll start to associate reading, which should be something pleasant, with being a form of punishment almost. So if you don't like it, don't force it. If you, on the other hand, are a bookworm, then good for you. Keep reading, because reading is amazing. More of us should read. And if you are like me and you don't actively enjoy reading, I'd recommend maybe listening to audiobooks or, of course, podcasts. And that is something that I do enjoy. And I've always enjoyed podcasts. I think I was a bit of an early adopter when it comes to podcasts because I never really tuned in to the radio, but as soon as I had a smartphone, as soon as I had Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I started searching for podcasts to listen to the news, to learn new things, to practice my languages. And this must have been over a decade ago now. And I remember maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, listening to podcasts wasn't that common. It wasn't that popular. And some people would even ask you, like, what's a podcast? You mean the radio, right? Or you mean an audiobook, right? So this was a new thing maybe a decade ago, and I was an early adopter. I adopted this technology before the majority, I think. It's a shame that I didn't start recording my own podcast when I first discovered podcasts over a decade ago. But no, I procrastinated. I put it off. I didn't want to expose myself as much as I do now. But now it's done. The damage is done. There's no looking back. And let's relate that with audiobooks. And my next question is, have you ever listened to an audiobook? And I have, but I've never bought an audiobook. There are certain applications online, and I think the most famous one is called Audible. 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 And it's the market leader in audiobooks. And I believe they have a connection with Amazon. So if you buy books on Amazon or you buy ebooks on Amazon for your Kindle, you can also download the audiobook version. So I had a monthly subscription to Audible, which is kind of like Netflix, let's say, but for audiobooks. So you can choose from a library of famous books. Not all of them will be included, because some books prefer to retain maybe a more old-fashioned way of doing business. So you buy individual audiobooks and that's it. They're not included in a subscription. But with this subscription on Audible, well, you can listen to as many audiobooks as you want, and you pay one fee at the end of every month. So I think it's a good business idea, and it's a great alternative for people who don't enjoy reading, people who are not bookworms. And I'll give you another little piece of advice related to this, a suggestion, a recommendation, a tip, and it is that if you really want to improve your English through reading and listening, maybe the best method that you can use is reading the physical book, whether that's paperback, hardback, or Kindle, but at the same time, in a synchronized manner, you can listen to the audiobook version. That way, you are reading, but at the same time, you are hearing the narration of the book. So then you can really appreciate the pauses, the drama, the pronunciation, and it's a fantastic way of shadowing as well. So that is my golden tip to learn languages of this week's podcast. And it is try, if you like reading, to read the book whilst you are listening to the audiobook. If you've ever done this before, let me know in the comments. Now, question number 2. Well, actually, number 3. I lie. It is, what's the last book you read? The last book I read was Lord of the Rings. This was the turning point for me. I read The Hobbit in Spanish, and it was okay. It was very complicated. It was very difficult. There were lots of describing words, so I got a little bit lost. But because I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, and I really enjoy the films, extended version, of course, I thought, why not read the book? And then I already know it, so it won't be so difficult, and I can learn more about the characters at the same time. So it took me a long time. I read it on my Kindle, which I now haven't used for a very, very long time. But I read it on my Kindle because of the fact that when reading on an electronic book, an ebook, you can press on certain words or phrases and get a translation. So it's maybe better for learners. Despite the fact that some of the translations weren't accurate, or some very difficult words didn't have a translation built into the technology, it helped me a lot to get through all of the books because it's a trilogy and each book is quite long. So I'm proud of myself for doing it and reading this trilogy. But I got to the end, and whilst maybe I enjoyed it at times, it was so tiring. It was exhausting. So those are the last books that I read, and I don't know when I'm going to read another book, to be honest. And one more question before we move on. Which books do you remember reading growing up? Now, I think I read the first couple of Harry Potter books. I know there are some people who are mega fans of Harry Potter and they're obsessed with it. I like Harry Potter, but I never really fell in love with it. It never properly grabbed my attention and gripped me. So, yeah, Harry Potter, I read a couple of them, but I never read all of them. I remember reading some horror books called Goosebumps. Maybe you're familiar with them, but there were lots of different books. They were all called Goosebumps, and then they had an individual title, and they were all horror stories, mainly designed at children and teenagers. And by the way, to get goosebumps is when you kind of feel very emotional, very nervous, or very scared. And it's like your hairs stand up and you're like, oh, you get goosebumps. And apart from that, I think in like English literature classes at school, we read a few different classics like To Kill a Mockingbird. I think we read some Shakespeare, but not that much. We read another book called Of Mice and Men. So I read some books when I was growing up, and I think on the podcast, my mum has mentioned that she tried to get me into reading, but it never quite worked. It's a shame, but it is what it is. Now, a question for you. What do you tend to go for? In other words, what do you tend to choose if we're thinking about fiction or non-fiction? Now, I'm going to give you my 2 cents. I'm going to give you my humble thoughts because as I've just been listing different fictional books, I've read a lot more fiction than non-fiction. But I think that to learn a language, at least for intermediate levels, perhaps not for advanced levels, non-fiction is probably easier and therefore more beneficial because fiction is full of descriptions. You have so many descriptions that it can be a little bit of a struggle. It can be difficult to get through certain passages and paragraphs because there are so many different adjectives, metaphors, and similes to describe a person, settings, or other. So I think fiction is great if you want to be transported to a different universe and you want to forget about real life, productivity, and all of these things. But it's an uphill battle, meaning that it's a challenge. You're going to struggle to get through certain books if they're very descriptive and if they are fictional. Whereas if we make a comparison with non-fiction, non-fiction, I think, has had a revival recently, ever since many people have become interested in personal growth, mental health, productivity, and learning in general, with finance as well. So, nonfiction is usually a little bit easier to understand because the vocabulary is simpler. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that the content is easier to understand. If it's a nonfiction book about law or about medicine or about dentistry or about chemistry, then even if English is my mother tongue and my first language, I would have a lot of difficulty to understand the concepts of certain non-fictional books. But if it's something that you're into, in my case, if it's related to sport, and I'm reading maybe a biography or an autobiography of a famous footballer, then this is vocabulary that I'm very familiar with already. So therefore, nonfiction would be easier. So I'm more likely to want to continue reading it without pausing and looking up words nonstop. And that's another common question I sometimes get asked. Some people ask me this: Lewis, if I'm reading or if I'm watching a series or watching a film, when new vocabulary appears, should I pause and look it up and take notes? Personally, I'd say no. I think the focus should be more on you enjoying being exposed to a language. Because that way, you develop this habit and you develop this interest and passion to continue to make English, in this case, a part of your regular routine. And if you're always stopping and starting and stopping and starting to pause whatever it is you're watching or pause reading to then look something up online, then think how it makes sense in the context, oh, it takes a long time and it can be a little bit annoying or off putting. So I'd say don't worry too much about stopping to look up every word or phrase or expression. Try to work out the meaning or figure out the meaning through context. And if it's something that you see is repeated again and again, then that's when I would look it up. If you see a new word just once, just let it go, keep reading, and keep enjoying it. If that word then appears another time, two other times, all right, fair enough. That's when I'd say, look it up, take a note, write it down. If you're using my application, that's when you can add it to your flashcards and review it later. And if not, I'm sure you have another way of really trying to memorize new words and phrases. So I know you didn't ask me that question, but it's possible you would have asked me later on. And from there, I'm going to share my screen again. And we've got another little dialogue. And this is a really short dialogue. So don't worry. And I'm going to read both roles. We have William and we have Esther. So let me begin. William, I've just signed up to a book club. The idea is to meet up with a bunch of people to discuss a designated novel per week. It's a bit geeky, but I love it. Esther, you're such a bookworm. To be honest, I don't think that'd be my cup of tea. William, don't judge a book by its cover. Wink, wink. Seriously though, I was a bit skeptical about it, but it's a nice social event and it pushes you to stick to a good habit, reading on a regular basis. Esther, you know what? I'm tempted, but I don't even remember the last book I read. William, the last one I read was 50 Shades of Grey. It's not the usual kind of book I go for, but it's actually quite well written. Well, I hated the film, so I doubt I'd like the book. So, do you have any other recommendations for me? William, how about a good thriller? Let me check the bestsellers and get back to you. Esther, all right. I look forward to it. If not a thriller, then some mystery could be decent. And that's it. Nice, short, and sweet. A little dialogue between William and Esther. And now, as we did before, if you're looking at the screen, I want you to try to match all of these words to their synonyms. These ones are a little bit easier than the ones before. So I'm going to go through them nice and quickly. Sign up to. If you sign up to something, it means you register for something. You enroll in something. Second word, geeky. Geeky. If you are geeky, you are nerdy. Maybe you like lots of comic books and video games. This is the stereotypical idea of a geek, a nerd. Notice that we don't say a freak or a freaky. No, no, no. A freak is a very, very strange person. But a geek or a nerd is someone who likes, traditionally, geeky things. The third word is a bookworm. And as I mentioned earlier, a bookworm is an avid reader, someone who loves reading. Number 4, it's not my cup of tea. If you say that something isn't your cup of tea, what you mean is you don't like it. This is a really British phrase. It's maybe a little bit old-fashioned, but it's still used. I could say that reading isn't really my cup of tea. The fifth phrase is, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't judge a book by its cover, you know? And that means don't judge people based on appearance. Don't use prejudice against them. Number 6 is skeptical. Skeptical. If you are skeptical, it means that you're a bit unsure. You haven't been convinced by something. Number 7, phrasal verb, stick to or stick with. They have the same meaning. And if you stick to something, it means you continue with something. You keep doing something. Like New Year's resolutions. You should try to stick to your New Year's resolutions. After that, we have tempted. I'm tempted to have a box of chocolates. Yummy. If you're tempted, it means you have temptation, that you are interested in doing something. And now we have the final two. The penultimate one, number 9, is go for. And if you go for something, you choose it. I don't know what dessert to go for, but I'm going to go for the panna cotta. Delicious. And last but not least, get back to someone is to respond to someone. Maybe if you send me an email and I don't respond for a few days, I'd say, I'm sorry that it's taken me so long to get back to you. Please forgive me for it. So there we have all of these words and phrases from the dialogue. And now I'm going to use them in conversation. So I've created a few little conversation questions, and I'm going to read them and answer a few of them. The first one I'm going to respond to is, do you have any geeky hobbies? Do you have any geeky hobbies? Any nerdy hobbies? Yes, I do. Not that many, to be honest. Nowadays, I don't play any video games. I don't watch cartoons or animes. I never really read many fantasy or sci-fi books. So I don't have that many geeky hobbies or nerdy hobbies, but that's probably because I don't have that many hobbies. But a few years ago, maybe it was before the pandemic. I think it probably was. But my memory is a bit blurry. I can't see it clearly. But anyway, where was I going with this? I know. What I wanted to say was that I think it must have been before the pandemic. There was this boom of Pokemon Go. Do you remember? On your phone, you could download the application of Pokemon Go, and that would mean that you could walk around different cities all over the world, and you'd see that there would be Pokemon in the wild, in the real world. So you could click on different places, different physical places in the real world, and then Pokemon would appear. And your job would be to throw your Pokeballs and try to catch these Pokemon. And if you've never heard of Pokemon, then this will mean nothing to you. But I was born in 1992. So the first 10 years of my life, I was always surrounded by Pokemon. My older sister liked Pokemon as well, so we used to watch the TV program. I used to have all of the games on my Game Boy and my Nintendo DS. So in particular in summer, when I'd have summer holidays, I would play on Pokemon Gold, Pokemon Yellow, Pokemon Red, Pokemon Sapphire. I had all of the games. And it was maybe my favorite game growing up. And I used to always dream about this unreal possibility that I could be a Pokemon trainer and I could travel around the world trying to catch different Pokemon and have Pokemon fights, battles with other trainers to try to get all of the badges. And in each region, you'd have different gym leaders that you would have to try to beat in order to win the badge and enter this grand competition of being a Pokemon master. Wow, you can really tell that I was a bit of a Pokemon geek. And obviously, that was when I was growing up. But then it was almost as if my childhood dream had come true when Pokemon Go was released. So I was running around, catching Pokemon, trying to battle other people, trying to become the master. And this, for a good year, was a pretty big hobby of mine. You can probably tell that I hadn't started posting content online because I didn't have time back then, because I'd spend hours and hours trying to catch Pokemon. And do you know the theme tune of Pokemon? Pokemon, gotta catch them all, Pokemon. Something like that. If you like Pokemon, I'm sure you liked the last few minutes. If you don't, well, this has probably just gone straight over your head. But let's move on from that question, and I'm going to answer one or two more. The next one is, have you ever been guilty of judging a book by its cover? Of judging someone, or maybe even something, by its appearance before actually getting to know that person or that place? And I'd say without a shadow of a doubt, I've definitely been guilty of judging a book by its cover in the past. I try not to be a superficial person, a shallow person, but I think it's built into our personalities a little bit, which, it is what it is. So there have been times when I've judged a book by its cover. If you see someone who maybe looks very messy, or they look a little bit violent, or they look like they're not very well educated, I might, discriminate them. And I might not want to become friends with them. And then you might realize over time that actually this person is lovely, they're intelligent, they're funny. And that proves to you and demonstrates that we shouldn't judge a book by its cover. We should always try to get to know someone before drawing any conclusions. So I've definitely been guilty of doing it, and I try to make a conscious effort not to do this. But sometimes it happens. We all have our individual and personal bias, depending on where we grew up and who we surround ourselves with. It is what it is. And one more question. How about, would you be tempted to sign up to a book club? In the dialogue, they were talking about book clubs. Would I be tempted to sign up to a book club? No. No, I wouldn't. Maybe there are other clubs or communities or activities that I would be more eager to sign up to. But a book club, it would just be a waste of time for me. My fiance actually signed up to a book club with her colleagues at work, but I don't think they've been very consistent. I don't think they've actually met up very often to discuss the books that supposedly they should have been reading. But maybe when and if I ever have the privilege of retiring and becoming a pensioner and I've got all of this free time on my hands, at that moment, we'll probably revisit that question if I'm tempted to sign up to a book club or not. And that'll do. I've been speaking for 45 minutes. It's been an action-packed podcast. I hope you like it when I do go through these PowerPoints that I use with my group classes with you. That way you can feel involved, even if you're not able to join my classes. And as I always mention, if you do want to join my classes, there's a link in the description. So thank you so much for watching, listening. Let me know what the last thing you ate was, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye!